So today I thought we'd talk about one of the most notorious Iron Age tribes of Northern Europe, and that is the Cimbri. Not only did the Cimbri give the Romans a good old thumping, but they're one of the very few tribes that we actually have any records of their rituals. So in this episode, I'll give you a brief introduction to the Cimbri, and also we'll dig into detail of this documented ritual. So who is this Cimbri tribe then? And where did they come from? Well, that's actually a very good question, and the jury's still out on the verdict. Some people claim they were a Germanic tribe, and others are Celtic, though most scholars seem to be siding on the Celtic theory, and they believe that they came from an area called Jutland, or the Jutland Peninsula, which is now Denmark. Now, what we do know about the Cimbri is that quite a few of them, along with their allies, migrated southwards towards Austria, or as it was known at the time, Noricum. And it's recorded that they didn't just migrate peacefully and turn up in Noricum. They had many fights and many battles along the way, and it was in Noricum in 1113 BC when they invaded the lands of a Roman ally, the Tourisci. Well, the Romans sent out their legions to help defend their allies, and the Cimbri, now feeling left out in the open, retreated back to a place where they felt they could better defend. And it was at this place that they met the Romans at a battle that has gone down in history as the Battle of Noreia. And it has been said that only a wild storm that blew up in the middle of the battle prevented the Romans from a complete annihilation. And this wasn't the only encounter they had with the Romans. Over the next few years, they would meet the Romans on a number of occasions, and the Romans usually came out the losers. In 109 BC, they defeated another Roman army under the consul of one Marcus Junius Silanus. And in 107, another Roman army bit the dust, and this one was led by Gaius Cassius Longinus. And for the unfortunate Longinus, well, this is where he met his end, right here at the Battle of Bordigala, which is now known as Bordeaux. Well, it seemed quite evident now that they could certainly give the Romans a run for their money. And now the greatest fear of all Romans was about to be realised. In 105 BC, they decided they would come along and knock on the Romans' door. Yes, that's right, these cheeky, uncivilised barbarians had the audacity to believe they could attack Rome. The Cimbri marched towards Rome, and they penetrated the Alps and entered northern Italy. And the Romans? Well, they didn't really fancy meeting the Cimbri up in the steep passes in the Alps. So what they decided to do was to allow the Cimbri to come through the Alps out onto the open plains, and what they would do was to build fortifications and a stronghold behind the River Po, and they would wait for their enemy. Well, we all know about Romans and their fortifications. And the result was predictable. The Cimbri took a fair old lashing, and two of their chieftains died there on the field. A third was taken prisoner, and the whole affair was devastating to the Cimbri. The Cimbri were annihilated. The women, it said, killed their own children and then themselves, rather than to be taken prisoner and put in slavery by the Romans. So that, all in all, put a decisive end to the Cimbri's ambitions in Northern Europe. But there's no doubt a formidable force they were. Now that we've gone through all that and we have a good understanding of just exactly who the Cimbri were, let's come back to the main topic of this discussion. The ritual that was documented by Strabo. So why is it this ritual is so important? Well, the truth is, there's just so little known about the Celts and what their rituals actually entailed, let alone an actual documented account. But we should bear in mind that the Romans were a little bit biased. The Cimbri didn't travel as a bunch of warriors. They travelled as family groups, and along with them went the priestesses of the tribe, grey dishevelled hair and dressed in white, and prior to battle, banging on hides stretched over the wagons, a fearsome sight. And this isn't the only account of these fearsome Celtic priestesses that we have. We told of a similar scene when the Romans attacked the sacred Isle of Anismone, where the women stood on the banks wailing and screaming like demons, putting the fear of God into every Roman, so much so that they stopped still in their tracks and were only motivated to drive on and continue the attack by the threats from their own generals. Now, these priestesses, they weren't just there to bang on drums and frighten the opposition. Certainly it was a role they played, and one they played very well. But they were also seers and diviners that spoke one-to-one with the Celtic gods, and they would get their information, and they would tell the chieftains how they should proceed. But the real story here is how they communed with their gods and what they did to the prisoners of war that sends shivers up your spine. You see, it was the prisoners that they used for the purposes of their divination, and the procedure for the start of the ceremony to commune with their gods went as such. Each prisoner was taken aside and crowned with a floral wreath. I suppose this would have been necessary so that the prisoner was dressed appropriately to show due respect to the gods that they would soon be coming to meet. They were then led one by one, each in turn, up to a wooden raised platform, where they were then made to climb the steps and proceed to the centre of the platform, where lay a large brazen vessel. They were made to kneel over the vessel, and saying their last goodbyes, they would have their throats slit. The blood would run down and be caught in the base of the vessel, ideal for the purposes of divination. And the divination came by consent of the gods, pleased to receive this life force back into their underworld. The blood would be poked and prodded and spread around the vessel to see just exactly what this precious life force could tell. But now the clever part, from all of these patterns that were created in the bottom of the sacred vessel, the priestess could now look in and divine the secrets of the future. But if this is not barbaric enough for you, the good news is Strabo tells us that not every prisoner was subjected to this procedure. Oh no, they weren't going to treat everyone like that. For others, there was far worse to come. If you got the slit throat in the vessel and died quickly, then you were really lucky. Others, not so fortunate, would be taken to the platform and splayed out, and then split open and their entrails removed. And the interesting patterns that these entrails made when thrown about was another way of speaking directly with the gods. Another fortune-telling favourite that proved popular with the crowd. So this is the ritual of the Cimbri that Strabo has recorded and documented and tells us about. But there's one other interesting aside here, and this involves the Gundestrup Cauldron. And that aside is that it's believed by many scholars that the Gundestrup Cauldron was one of the sacred vessels of the Cimbri. Many believe that this is the same sacred vessel that was placed at the centre of the platform in the ritual, the same brazen vessel. And if you want to hear more about the Gundestrup Cauldron, then I did a little video about that a little while ago, so I'll place a link in the description down below. So with that, I hope you've all enjoyed today's discussion, and if you have, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed already, then the subscription button's down below. So with that, I'll see you again in another couple of weeks on the next one.